Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our webinar to learn more about ERA's $40 million Emerging Innovators Challenge. My name is Isabella Tarasco, and I'm the Technology Investment Lead here at Emissions Reduction Alberta, or ERA. Today, I am joined by Justin Riemer, ERA's CEO, and Chris Owttrim, our Executive Director of Technology and Innovation, who will be talking about our Emerging Innovators Challenge today. Before we get things started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge where we are. In the spirit of reconciliation, we have the privilege of living, working, and investing on traditional territories, which include Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 nations, Métis Nations Region 3 and 4, Inuit, and all others who live on and care for these lands. In terms of agenda today, we have 1 hour together. First, Justin will talk briefly about ERA and our mandate. Next, Chris will provide an overview of the Emerging Innovators Challenge call for proposals. We'll cover some key points regarding scope and eligibility, the submission process, and the timelines around the funding decision. We'll also provide advice for anyone who is interested in making a submission. And finally, we'll end off by answering some of your questions. So, if you have any questions you would like us to address, please type them into the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel as we go. However, I ask that you wait until later on in the webinar to ask your question, as it may be answered as we go along. In addition, please do not include your idea for a proposal in the question box. We will answer as many questions as we can, but if we don't address your question, you're welcome to follow up with us after. So with that, it is my pleasure to turn things over to our CEO, Justin.
Thank you very much, Isabella, and hello, everyone. It's great to be with you today, and very excited to tell you a little bit about ERA, and then we'll get into a bit more of the funding challenge details. So since 2009, ERA has invested the proceeds of carbon pricing on large emitters to reduce greenhouse gases and strengthen the competitiveness in new and existing industries in Alberta. Our funding is sourced from Alberta's large emitters who are required to reduce their GHG emissions to meet regulated targets under the Government of Alberta's tier regulations. We are one of the key agents responsible for delivering on these funds, and we offer a clear line of sight from the funds to the investments in technology solutions needed to help achieve emissions reduction and economic growth. Our focus is on that later stage technology, which means we accelerate projects towards broader industry deployment and adoption and help to de-risk projects in the crucial pilot, demonstration, and scale-up stages of technology development. Our investments both improve the competitiveness of existing industry by lowering costs and improving environmental performance, and creating opportunities for new businesses and continued economic growth. Our vision is for the province to have competitive industries that deliver sustainable environmental outcomes, attract investment, and build a diversified low emissions economy. And we are anchored in the belief that success is measured in both economic and environmental terms. It's not either or, it's and. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions is the core of what we do, and we need to attribute everything to that. But on the other side of the coin, we need to look at the cost benefits for Albertans in the form of new products, new companies, and new jobs. So while many jurisdictions have mechanisms to invest in clean technology, and you're seeing more and more these days, the ERA model is very unique. We are well placed to deal with the risks of innovation. Our funding is non-dilutive, meaning proponents do not have to give up ownership, project equity, or even intellectual property. We have an independent, transparent, and rigorous selection process, which is designed to minimize risk. And we'll hear more about that later from Chris. Once projects are selected, ERA continues to provide ongoing support to proponents, convening resources, expertise, and partnerships that help improve the opportunity for success. And when projects do not progress as expected, we learn from those lessons. We learn from our failures, sharing the knowledge we gain with others who may innovate more quickly as a result of those experiences. All this to say is our structure and approach allows us to respond quickly to the needs of the innovation system, carry funds from one budget year to the next, which is very important, ensuring multi-year projects are possible, and reinvesting funds when projects do not progress to allow other innovators to succeed. We are so proud of the results that we've achieved over our close to 15 years in operation. We've had a substantial impact to date. We look at a range of technologies, and what unifies them is all these great ideas that can help Alberta to be successful in a net zero world. So since 2009, we've committed close to $900 million in 254 projects worth $7.7 billion in project value. Our investments are helping measure methane emissions from satellites, transitioning Alberta's diesel-powered transit buses and transport trucks and trains to hydrogen and electric powers, allowing drones to plant trees in dangerous and difficult to reach areas, and produce renewable energy and high-quality fertilizer from food waste. It's important to note that we require a one-to-one investment from private sources. Public funding is not enough to accelerate new technologies. Industry needs to have skin in the game. Historically, we've significantly exceeded this requirement. One of the things we're very proud of is that for every dollar invested by ERA, almost $7 is invested by private funders. We have a 7-to-1 funding ratio. Our investments are putting people to work. Job creation is really critical to the province, and so this is an area we focus on as well. And our modeling suggests that our investments will generate over 33,000 years of person-year jobs by 2025 and contribute more than $4.9 billion to the provincial GDP. I want to tell you a story about a technology that we have supported in the past that's making a lot of headlines these days. This is Ever Technologies, and this is a picture of their pilot project that we invested with them several years ago, about 5 years ago now. We provided $1 million to them to do a commercial loop pilot scale in near Rocky Mountain House. And back in 2017, which isn't that long ago, Ever was working in their basements trying to figure out how to start up a young geothermal company. They had a handful of people trying to figure out how they were going to get this idea funded. And when it was a project that really could not be proven in a lab. But investors, as you know, need to see projects proven in the field before they consider any types of investment. So Ever's journey is an example of how early stage investments are nurturing innovation. Back in 2019, then ERA supported this pilot project in Rocky Mountain House, and that gave the chance for these investors to see the technology in action. Only 4 years later, they are in the process of building a commercial scale loop in Germany worth close to $300 million that will heat 100,000 homes in Germany. They've recently signed a deal with the US Air Force Base and the Department of Defense in the US to put a geothermal loop in a Texas Air Force Base. And just yesterday, it was announced that they are the proud recipients of the first investment made by the Canada Growth Fund of $90 million of investment. And they have succeeded in raising several million more through private equity placements, venture capital placements over the past year. So we're really proud of Ever and their achievements and proud that ERA played a role in scaling them up to success. So how do we make these investments? Our guiding document is our technology roadmap, and I'd encourage you to take a look at that on the web. That will give you a good idea of how we think about our investment portfolio and our go-forward strategy. The technology roadmap outlines the mix of short, medium, and long-term technologies that will help Alberta realize its environmental and economic goals. And it focuses on cross-cutting technology areas of investment that can be adapted and deployed across numerous industrial operations. As you can see on the screen, these include carbon sequestration, future fuels, energy efficiency, industrial transformation, and circular economy. And these are technologies that we consider to have some of the greatest impact on Alberta's greenhouse gas emissions and economy, as well as the most relevant to other sectors and jurisdictions. So our technology roadmap and business plan guide our investments, and we'll quickly share how it works from there. Projects are selected primarily through competitive funding opportunities. A few of our most recent funding calls are highlighted here: Reshaping Energy Systems, which we're just in the final stages of selecting at this time. We recently announced the Industrial Transformation Challenge a few months ago with our Minister, Rebecca Schultz, and we are in the process of evaluating a number of submissions from our Accelerating Hydrogen Challenge. And of course, you're here today to learn about our latest opportunity, Emerging Innovators Challenge. ERA is continuing to support the mission of the Government of Alberta's Tier Fund by supporting small and medium-sized enterprises working to develop transformative emission reduction technologies. Our trusted partners are critical and central to ERA's success and delivering on the commitment to drive to commercialization. It takes a village to commercialize technology, and there are more supports than ever before in the clean tech innovation ecosystem. So we work very closely with our trusted partners across this ecosystem to leverage funds, due diligence, share risk, and reduce administrative burden on applicants. We work with strategic trusted partnerships in Alberta, with the federal government, and across the country where appropriate. These include Alberta Innovates, Prairies Can, Natural Resources Canada, and many others. We recently secured a partnership with Plug and Play and Avatar Innovations as well. We intend to leverage significant private and public dollars with this funding call. And now, with this short overview, I'll hand over things to Chris Owttrim, who will provide the deep details on the Emerging Innovators Challenge.
Thanks very much, Justin. I'm really pleased that we're here today to talk about ERA's recently launched Emerging Innovators Challenge call for proposals. This investment from the Government of Alberta through the Tier Fund will support small and medium-sized enterprises, also known as SMEs, that are developing innovative emissions reduction technologies right here in Alberta. This challenge will invest in scale-up, pilot, demonstration, and first-of-kind projects to move these technologies closer to commercialization. And we know that Alberta businesses supported by this funding will be empowered to de-risk projects and reduce the time it takes to get their technologies to market, advancing their innovations that will help Alberta on our pathway to reduced greenhouse gas emissions. First, a little context on what we're looking for in this program and why we're targeting this area right now. SMEs are defined as organizations with fewer than 500 employees and represent by far the largest category of companies here in Alberta. Over 210 SMEs were recently identified in a report that are working on clean technology, and over half of those are aiming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we know there's a lot of folks out there working on things that we're interested in. And we know that SMEs are critical to the economic prosperity of the province and to our efforts to create a carbon neutral economy by 2050. However, clean tech SMEs often face barriers to commercialization, including financing for commercial pilots, accessing investment capital, maintaining sufficient cash flow, and often overcoming regulatory barriers. The funding from our Emerging Innovators Challenge will help our SMEs here in Alberta overcome those barriers and advance their technologies to market. As Justin mentioned, we're working with a number of our strategic partners in this space, including Alberta Innovates, Plug and Play, and many others that were a couple slides ago, to provide specific support to applicants through investment and networking. We've designed this call specifically with SMEs in mind. And so in the process of designing this program, we took a lot of feedback from the SME community and from other stakeholders to understand the challenges that SMEs face in accessing our funding, including the challenges inherent to competing with larger, better resourced multinational companies in these sort of funding programs. And so for this challenge, we're specifically only allowing SMEs to apply, meaning that you'll be only competing against other companies in a similar category for a more level playing field. Taking that to the next level, we aim to ensure that during the review, we're also accounting for differences among SMEs. We know that the range of 0 to 499 employees is still a very broad range, and so we will work to take that into consideration during review. So looking at things like company size, maturity, revenue status, and other factors to again ensure that each applicant is being evaluated against similar peers. We have also asked for some additional information about your organization as an attachment to your expression of interest, and so please make sure you fill that out so we can provide us with enough information so we know how to sort you. We've worked hard to incorporate your feedback into our process and reduce barriers to applications while streamlining the proposal process. So this includes simplifying the proposal templates and reducing the onerousness of several elements of the process. And we really appreciate all the feedback that has gone into the design of this program. We've also added some flexibility on our project timelines and disbursement schedules, including the ability for some applicants to consider offering a portion of our funding upfront to help out with those cash flow problems. We've also improved our guidance on in-kind contributions to make it clear how these can be used for matching, as we know these are a critical resource and contribution to projects that SMEs lead. Last but not least, we've added numerous additional applicant supports throughout the process, and so more info on that, including contact info, is coming up in a couple of slides. So let me start out with some details on what we're specifically looking to fund in this program. As always, ERA is looking to fund capital P projects, so a scope of work with clear objectives, milestones, timelines, deliverables, and a well thought out budget. The goal is to take technology from point A to point B as part of your pathway advancing towards commercialization. So we don't typically fund ongoing operations or open-ended research programs, and so we are looking for projects with a clear timeline and a clear endpoint. The maximum length of a project is 3 years from initiation, plus up to 1 year of operational time where applicable. And so for clarity, what we mean is that the development, design, construction, and commissioning of your technology or its installation needs to fit within that 3-year period from the time you kick off your project with us. But we do have flexibility, and so we're always open to a conversation on how to make those timelines work for you and your project. And we know that if we're funding a large-scale technology demonstration or deployment, and we want to understand the outcomes and learnings from that project, we want to see the project actually operate. And so we do have the ability to add up to a year of post-commissioning operational time to generate that performance data. In terms of project initiation, applicants that are awarded funding will be required to commence work on the proposed project within 120 days of ERA funding approval. Again, that's our typical requirement, but we do allow for some flexibility there as well. So successful applicants may request a delayed start date of up to 12 months after receiving funding approval in cases where there's a need to take that time to develop the project, align with facility turnarounds or budget approvals and things of that nature. And finally, because good ideas can come from anywhere, applicants are not required to be Alberta-based, although we obviously have a very strong preference for applicants that can demonstrate tangible operations and benefits here in Alberta. We do know, however, that technologies can originate from anywhere, so it doesn't particularly matter if the technology has been developed or trialed elsewhere in the world. What we're really looking for is for you to be trialing that technology and implementing it here in Alberta during your funded project. The last point on this slide is about contact, and again, I'll get into this in a few slides, but we do really strongly encourage applicants that have concerns or questions about the eligibility of their proposal to reach out to our team. We have an open door policy here at ERA when it comes to supporting applicants through the application process, and we're always happy to chat. So I mentioned we are looking for projects that are going to pilot, demonstrate, or have a first of kind implementation of a technology here in Alberta. And so what does that actually mean? So what we're looking for is, again, SMEs to advance their technology towards commercialization in their project. And so you do need to demonstrate how your project fits into one of these categories that's on the screen here. But generally what we're looking for is, again, that first proof point of your technology that's going to make a meaningful impact in its pathway towards commercialization. We do require all applicants to demonstrate how their project is an innovative solution for emissions reductions in Alberta. So we're not looking for deployment of commercially available solutions or a project funding request that's simply to reduce a financial barrier to deploying a technology. So we do want to see technology advancement and de-risking, and we do want to see you make a strong case for how your development is additional to business as usual activities. So again, we're looking for novel approaches, and that could be a first of kind in Alberta or in a particular industry or an adaptation of a technology to a new use case. And there's a few more examples of that in our guidelines, which I encourage you to take a look at. So the number one question we get from folks anytime we launch one of these funding calls is, what technologies is ERA looking for, and does a given technology fit the program? I'm very happy to say that for the Emerging Innovators Challenge, we do not have a specific technology focus. And so what that means is this is a non-prescriptive technology funding challenge. We do not have a detailed or exhaustive list of all technologies that might qualify. In fact, any technology in theory that reduces emissions in Alberta in a novel way and is being developed by an SME could be an eligible project in this call. And so the most important message I can leave you with on this slide and the one that follows it is that the onus is on you, the applicant, to demonstrate that your project fits within the goals of this funding call. And I want to stress, ERA doesn't think that we know everything that's out there and what's under development. And so we're really looking forward to applicants bringing forward their best and most exciting ideas for us to consider. More information on this can be found in the guidelines document for the Emerging Innovators Challenge on our website, and a little bit of a more detailed list can be found there as well. But I think what I'd like to do over this slide and the next one is take us through a couple areas that are good examples of areas that we think could be good solutions and good proposals under this call. First off, we have digital solutions for logistics, agriculture, energy, and industry. And so we know there's a whole host of robotics, automation, AI, machine learning technologies out there that can help industries solve challenges, reduce energy use, and reduce emissions. We also are interested in software-based solutions for understanding and managing that energy use and emissions, whether it's in industry, in the power grid, in the vehicle sector, or many others. We're also looking at technologies that can valorize waste and enhance recycling and value recovery, again, from a wide range of industries. And we're interested in advancing new materials and biomaterials and advanced manufacturing to help support these emerging markets in Alberta, particularly for things like critical materials and new energy minerals. We're also excited about low emissions building technologies, and we know that that overlaps with a lot of what I've just talked about in terms of software solutions, but there's also some hard tech that we need to deploy there. Next slide. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but I do have a few more on this slide. So we're interested in precision agriculture and other novel practice-based solutions. Methane abatement continues to be an area of interest for us, and so we are interested in vented and fugitive methane abatement. We're also looking at omics and other life science-based solutions to reduce GHGs, particularly in the agriculture sector. And we'd love to see some projects related to detection, measurement, and quantification of methane and other GHGs from some of these hard to measure sectors. The last point on the slide is related to nature-based solutions, and we've had this call out in a few of our programs, but again, this is a bit of a gap in our portfolio that we are hoping to see some solutions in. So once again, not an exhaustive list, but hopefully this provides some illustration in terms of we are seeking a broad range of technologies, and there's quite a few different approaches to reducing emissions that could be eligible in this program. The last thing I want to flag is that this call is seeking transformative opportunities to position Alberta for success in a future low emissions global economy. Given that, there is certainly a strong preference for technologies and solutions to capitalize on investment opportunities and reduce emissions here in Alberta. But we know that not all of these technologies are going to directly reduce emissions. Some of them might play more of an enabling role or supporting other emissions reducing technologies. And so we are certainly open to technologies with enabled reductions, provided you can make a strong case for your technology's overall contribution to transitioning our economy towards net zero emissions. Getting into some eligibility criteria. So as I mentioned off the top, the most important eligibility criterion for this call is that we are only looking for SMEs as eligible applicants. And again, we've defined that as enterprises with less than 500 employees. So small enterprises have less than 50 employees, and medium enterprises have less than 500. So small and medium enterprises are the only eligible applicants to this program. We, of course, strongly encourage not-for-profits, Indigenous-owned SMEs, and other similar entities to apply. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a private business or a for-profit business. And while we always encourage partnerships, we want to stress that they are not mandatory for this program. We are happy to see an applicant apply in isolation, but of course, partnerships can often strengthen that value proposition. And so large corporations, government labs, municipalities, post-secondary or research organizations, commercialization accelerators, those are examples of folks that might not be eligible applicants, but could certainly be a partner on a project led by an SME. And I will say we will look quite closely at all projects to make sure that the SME is really doing the lion's share of the work on the project, and that they're not just applying on behalf of a partner who doesn't qualify. We do really strongly encourage all applicants, again, from that list that I just listed, to work with our post-secondary research institutions, municipalities, Indigenous communities where you can, because those sort of partnerships, again, outside of the private sector can add a lot of value to the project. We want to see those partnerships be used to develop, attract, and retain skilled workers, increase our innovation capacity as a province, and support local communities. And so all of those are benefits that we look for in these projects. One last thing to note, while we do not restrict the number of applications that you as an individual applicant can submit, we do encourage you to be selective and bring forward only your most promising and highest quality applications. I can tell you if we see 10 applications from a single company, a single SME in this call, our reviewers are going to be very skeptical about your ability to deliver on so many projects at one time, and it might indicate a lack of focus, right? So do think about that and make sure that you're bringing forward your strongest opportunities for consideration in this program. Next, the fun part, what sort of funding is available in the program? So as Justin mentioned, this is a $40 million funding competition. So that's the total dollars available to all the projects that we will fund in the program. Out of that, we will fund up to $5 million of ERA contribution per project. We will also have a minimum funding request of $250,000, which reflects approximately the scale of solutions and projects that we're targeting. If you're going to request less than that, or you think, I just need maybe 100,000 or less to get your technology advanced, we know there are other funding programs and other partners in the ecosystem who you're probably a better fit for, and it's probably a better use of your time to apply for that rather than to go through our entire process to request less than the minimum. ERA may choose to award less project funding than what is requested. And so my advice when you're thinking on how much to apply for between that 250,000 and 5 million is to really carefully consider how much ERA money is needed to make your project happen and not to request more than that. We do always look for a justification of the funding requested, and we're always looking for the best value for our dollars on these investments. So please keep that in mind. As is always the case, we will only match contributions to these projects on a one-to-one basis, and those contributions need to be towards eligible expenses. In other words, for every dollar that ERA provides to a project, there must be a matching contribution from the private sector. And as Justin mentioned, it's usually greater than one-to-one leverage. I think our average is somewhere around $3 of other contributions for every dollar ERA contributes. And obviously our overall is closer to 7-to-1. But I want to stress that we're very flexible on what sort of contributions can be matched. So obviously cash contributions, debt or equity from the applicant can certainly be matched, but we are also happy to match contributions from project partners. So for example, a customer that you bring in on the project, or to match certain in-kind contributions that represent real costs to the project. So if you're paying employees, if you have materials and supplies that are going to go towards the project, we can certainly match some of those. And again, we encourage you to consider our eligible expense and cost instructions that are on our website for more information on that. We're also happy to co-fund projects with other public sector funders. So we don't have a formal stacking limit on public funding and grants per se, but again, ERA won't ever exceed 50% of the total project value with our contribution. There's a lot of information available online as to what is considered an eligible contribution and an eligible expense. So again, I encourage you to read our guidelines that are posted online. One last thing to add here, ERA funding is distributed on a milestone by milestone basis, covering costs that have been incurred by a project to complete each milestone. And so it is a payment in arrears. However, for this call, we know that cash flow can be a challenge for SMEs. And so we are open to considering upfront funding in some cases. And again, that'll be a discussion we have as you move through the process. And ultimately, if you're successful, we can have that conversation during contracting. So our funding process has 3 stages, 2 stages of evaluation followed by project contracting and execution. So I'll just quickly run you through what that process looks like, and then I'll map that to the timelines for this particular funding challenge. So as you can see in the diagram, we start with an expression of interest or EOI stage, in which we invite you to provide a short document that summarizes your project and provides an overview of its outcomes. So we are looking for no more than 10 pages for your core EOI, and it must be submitted by our online system by the due date of the challenge, which in this case is December 14th. We often get questions about if we intend to extend the deadline or if we will allow late applicants. Unfortunately, due to fairness considerations, we will not allow late applicants, and I can tell you right now, we have not ever extended a deadline in our history. So do not count on that, and please plan to have your application in by December 14th if you wish to be considered. So once all the EOIs are submitted, they are evaluated by a team of independent experts. So we bring together a team of evaluators with subject matter expertise in business, financing, science, engineering, GHG quantification, and other factors, and they evaluate all proposals according to our evaluation criteria. Following that process, we will invite a short list of projects to submit a full project proposal, or FPP, and this constitutes the second stage of our process, where there's a more detailed review of all of the materials that you've submitted. We will provide more information on the full project proposal process, guidelines, templates, and criteria to those applicants that are shortlisted. I should also note that during the full project proposal stage, we do assign a proposal advisor to each applicant to help them through the process and help them in development of their proposal. And that's a key part of our efforts to provide supports to applicants and reduce their barriers to submitting the best possible proposal that they can. The FPP process culminates with an in-depth review meeting where all projects are discussed in detail, and ultimately a recommendation is brought forward to ERA's Board of Directors for consideration. And of course, all final funding decisions are made by ERA's Board of Directors. Once we've decided which projects to fund, we enter into legal agreements with successful applicants that detail the terms and obligations of each party as it relates to the contribution and completion of the project. And as mentioned before, our funding is distributed on a milestone by milestone basis, and we do require progress reporting and ultimately final reporting on the outcomes of the project. And so we do require all funded applicants, all funding recipients to produce a final outcomes report, which we will share publicly for the broader benefit of Alberta. Of course, respecting commercial confidence and IP. The final thing to note about our process is that the entire evaluation process, both stages, are overseen by an independent fairness monitor who is appointed by and reports directly to our Board of Directors. So going from the funding process to the timelines of this challenge, just wait for the slide to update. We have our expression of interest deadline of December 14th, 2023. So that is a Thursday, and the deadline is at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. I will say the system closes at 5 p.m. sharp, and again, we will not allow late submissions, so please start your submission early. Projects that are shortlisted in the EOI phase will be notified by early February, and then we'll have until late April to provide full project proposals, again, working hand in hand with support from the ERA team. We will schedule oral presentations with those shortlisted applicants in the spring, and then we expect to take these projects to our board for a funding decision in June, after which we will notify successful recipients. So if you applied EOI, you can expect to hear back sometime in February. And again, if you're shortlisted, you'll have then a few months to prepare your proposal, and you'll find out about your funding decision by the summer. Next slide is there. So further to that point about outcomes reporting and lessons learned, we do require this of all ERA funding recipients. So we do require all projects to report on things like the GHG reductions, actual and projected from their project, job creation, and other environmental, economic, and social benefits. We're also really keen on having you report on the lessons learned and the technology advancement through the project. This is a really important component of our funding to share knowledge and encourage broader and more informed decision making on future investments. And so we will encourage all applicants and indeed enlist you in certain events and knowledge sharing activities to ensure that there's wide dissemination of the knowledge and learnings from the funded projects. We participate in a variety of events throughout the year, in person and digital, on panel discussions and as keynote speakers, and we're happy to give profile to some of our funding recipients to make sure that you can reach as broad an audience of potential investors and clients as possible. We continue to reach new audiences as well through our Carbon Copy podcast, and I'll give a quick plug. We've just recorded a few new episodes of that podcast, and we're really excited again to profile some of those investments that we've made. So please give that a look and a listen on any platforms that you use. We've also increasingly been bringing our project stories to life through video, and so you can check out our website for a few examples of recent video profiles of our projects. Justin's story about Ever earlier in the webinar today is a great example of how we like to celebrate our successes and the successes of our cohort companies that we funded. So the last couple slides I have for you are about some of the frequently asked questions and Chris's top tips for preparing a successful submission. We get a lot of questions about this throughout the process, and again, questions are very much encouraged, so please don't hesitate to reach out to our team. But hopefully some of these tips in the next couple of slides will help address some early questions you might have. So first and foremost, we often receive 10 times more funding requested than we can meet. So for a $40 million program, we might receive more than $400 million requested among all the EOIs. So it's really important that all applicants make a very strong case for why their project should be funded at the level that they requested. And so that requires a deliberate, intentional, and sophisticated approach to preparing a proposal. And so there's a lot of best practices out there in terms of proposal writing, and there's a lot of best practices that we can share with you, having seen thousands of these proposals over the years. So my first tip for you is start now. from now until the submission deadline, we have just over 7 weeks for you to prepare your expression of interest. Now, we know it doesn't take that long to put together a 10-page application. However, it does take time to forge partnerships, get internal approvals, and allocate resources for projects. And you don't necessarily need to have all those things confirmed and every partnership finalized by the EOI submission deadline. And you certainly don't need to have cash in hand to match our funding to start the process. But the farther along you are with some of those details and the better line of sight you can give us in developing those materials, the better chance you have of being successful in the process. So the first thing you need to do, if you haven't already, is create an account on our online portal. You can see the link there, erims.outcomeplus.com. You will need to submit a proposal through that online portal in order to be considered in the challenge. We do not accept proposals in any other format. So if you maybe have an older account, we do encourage you to go back and make sure that you still have your login credentials and can access the system. The next point, and I really can't emphasize this enough, is to give the call for expressions of interest document a good detailed read. It's not very long, and it does answer most of the questions that we get on a regular basis. There's a lot of insight and information in there that will help you in preparing the best possible proposal, and again, we'll answer some of the questions that you might come up as you work through it. If you have a project that is not eligible, for example, or doesn't fit with this particular call for proposals, you can save yourself a lot of time and heartache by reading that guidelines document and figuring that out early. So this next point is really an extension of that last one, and that is to review the evaluation criteria, which are in that call for expressions of interest guidelines document, because those are the criteria upon which each proposal will be evaluated, shortlisted, and ultimately funded. And so taking a look at those criteria, how they're weighted, and how we talk about them in the guidelines will be a critical guide for you in preparing a good proposal. And of course, you will note that those proposals have different weightings, and so certainly putting more effort towards the ones with higher weightings is encouraged, but we do need to see proposals that are strong across all the criteria in order to have a strong chance for funding. Some other key points for preparing a successful submission: it is very important to use clear language and to address the points laid out in the template. Our evaluation team consists of subject matter experts, but if they can't decipher the information that's been provided, or if it looks like a document that was written by a bot with a bunch of buzzwords or something like that, they're not going to be able to make a qualified assessment. So we do want you to avoid filling your document with extraneous information, and it's really important that you follow the bullet points and prompts in our template to make sure that you're giving our reviewers the information that they need to make an informed decision on your proposal. So speaking of the 10-page limit, that strictly applies to the expression of interest document. So there are a number of attachments that we allow you to include, especially letters of support, but also the information about your corporate registration, for example. So these don't count against your 10-page limit, but they can be highly beneficial, in particular those support letters, in fleshing out your project. Of course, we also encourage you not to abuse those attachments, and we do reserve the right to truncate any unnecessary attachments. So if you're spending time writing up a huge appendix to your proposal, that time can probably be better spent elsewhere because the reviewers are not going to see it. Last but certainly not least, and I alluded to this already, but please do not wait until the last day to submit your application. I can tell you in the past, we have had to not look at good opportunities because they missed a deadline or had a computer issue at the very last minute and were unable to submit, and we were unable to consider their proposal in a fair manner with the other applicants. So this is something we are firm on as a fairness monitor, as a fairness consideration for the process, and our fairness monitor does monitor that carefully. However, if you do have technical issues during the submission process, our team is happy to help you resolve them. So we do have a dedicated resource for our online portal, and our applications team is always available to respond to requests that come in. However, if those issues materialize on the last day and you're sending panicked emails to us at the last minute, it is possible that there'll be simply too many requests for us to get to in time before the deadline. And so again, the earlier you start your submission and work through those potential issues, the better we'll be able to help you and make sure that you can get your proposal submitted on time. I mentioned this already, but in some cases, there may be an opportunity for ERA to share your proposal with our trusted partners and explore the possibility of gaining additional funding support. So during the submission process, you're going to see a checkbox or a yes/no menu giving us permission to share your submission with trusted partners. And so I encourage you to do so. Again, we'll only share with partners with which we have a privacy and confidentiality agreement in place, and for the sole purpose of exploring further funding leverage on your project. Of course, if you don't wish us to share your proposal, no hard feelings, just select no, and it won't affect your evaluation with ERA in any way. So the last couple of comments around what content to make sure you include in your application. So first, I always encourage you to remember that our funding comes from Alberta's carbon pricing system, the TIER regulation, and as such, our mandate revolves around greenhouse gas benefits and being successful in a low carbon economy. So it might be obvious to you how your technology fits in with that definition and results in greenhouse gas benefits, but it's really important to make sure that's crystal clear in the proposal, particularly for proposals where your benefits might be enabled or indirect. We also want applicants to make it clear how the project will advance their technology to commercialization. I can't tell you the number of proposals we've seen where it's an exciting technology and the project seems well defined, but they haven't provided a strong narrative on how the project will actually move the technology forward. And that makes it really hard for us to invest in the project, because that's a key thing that we look for. Another piece that folks sometimes miss out on is clearly identifying the site where your project is going to be, or if that's not finalized, giving us a clear plan for securing a site. Again, that's a key risk for all pilot projects, and so missing that in your proposal could be a critical gap. The last piece I want to talk about is broader benefits. I think a key part of ERA's evaluation process is we're looking for investments where our dollars are well leveraged, and I don't just mean by matching. I mean where our dollars will achieve a broader benefit than just for that specific project and for that specific recipient of the funding. And so things like knowledge sharing, partnerships, technology transfer, commercialization channels, and other elements, including partnerships with researchers, can really help set your proposal apart from the field. The last comment I'll make is that ERA has numerous trusted partners in the ecosystem, and we are in regular communication with those funding organizations. And we are aware of other funding for other projects that are out there. So make sure that you're telling us the same story that you're telling those other funders, otherwise it can raise questions and red flags. We are very happy to co-fund with other funders, so there's no need to hide other investments, for example. We have seen that in the past. So last slide before we get to the Q&A, I promise, but applicant support is a key part of our process. And as I mentioned, we've worked really hard to expand our applicant support offering for this call to reduce the barriers that SMEs face in accessing our funding. So we have a number of staff that are available to you as applicants to support you through the process. You'll see 3 email inboxes listed here on this slide. Now, generally, if you submit to any of these 3, we are able to triage you and get you where you need to go, but it does help to email the right person first so you can get the fastest possible response. So for general support with the guidelines, the template, or with understanding if your project fits the call and how to put the best foot forward in terms of the narrative you're pursuing, you can email applications@eralberta.ca. For support with understanding how your project reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and again, telling the best possible story there, we have our greenhouse gas experts available to you. You'll see the email there. And of course, for any support with the online system, there's a separate inbox for that. So again, I do encourage you to reach out via those 3 channels primarily, because if you reach out through other email accounts or through phone lines, your response to your inquiry may be delayed. We do get extremely high volumes of questions and inquiries on these programs. And so the more you can do to help us help you, the better. We have a lot of great information on our website. So that's eralberta.ca, including a frequently asked questions document and a few recordings of past webinars we've done on how to prepare a good proposal. So those are very easy to find on our website if you load that up. As Justin mentioned earlier, ERA also partners with relevant ecosystem partners like Alberta Innovates, Innotech Alberta, Platform Calgary, Plug and Play, Avatar Innovations, Foresight, and many others to support applicants. So these partners and service providers offer a wealth of support to SMEs well beyond funding, and so we encourage applicants to seek that support if you need it. So for example, if you feel like you need help with describing your target market, you may need a business advisor to support your project. And our partners can definitely help with that. So we encourage you to take a look at that earlier slide with the list of partners and investigate the services they have on offer. We are committed to also leveraging those partners to provide targeted supports to folks that are shortlisted in this process. And so if you advance to the next stage, there will be additional supports available. So we do provide technical proposal advisors, as well as representatives from our greenhouse gas and finance teams to support you in developing that full project proposal, so you don't have to go it alone. And we're also planning to offer additional supports through our ecosystem partners to both shortlisted and funding applicants. More details will be available for that at the full project proposal stage. So for now, stay tuned. We're really hoping to make this a challenge where the successful applicants get more than just funding. They get a real boost towards commercialization in all aspects of their technology journey. So with that, I'll hand it over to Isabella to moderate our Q&A period.
Thanks, Chris. So please insert any questions you have in the question box rather than using the raise hand function. That's typically on the right-hand side of your screen. I will start with one of the questions here. Do applicants require matching funds up front? And can you describe when these matching funds need to come into play?
That is a really great question, Isabella. So traditionally, we do look for confirmation of other funding for the project, so a full financing plan, including ERA, at the outset of the project. So that would be once we've selected the project and we're moving through to contracting. So what that means is you certainly don't need to have those matching funds secured or in hand at the time of a proposal. And you don't even need to have them in hand at the time of funding approval, but we will look for them upon commencement of the project. Now, in this particular funding call, we are exploring options to provide some flexibility on that matching, and that includes ERA providing upfront funding support. And so that could reduce the need to have all the funds in hand. But ultimately, our funding is dispersed on a milestone completion basis. And so you will need sufficient funding to complete a given milestone before ERA will reimburse you for it. So keep that in mind as you're working through your financing plan and cash flow model.
Thank you, Chris. Now, are there any technologies that are excluded from this challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we do talk about that in the expression of interest guidelines document. So by and large, the only technologies that are explicitly excluded are those that have been supported or are currently being supported in some of the parallel funding programs that we have available at present. So for example, we have a hydrogen challenge in the market right now that we're doing evaluations on. And so to avoid oversaturating the portfolio, for example, with technologies in that category, hydrogen technologies are not eligible for this challenge. And so there's a few other examples like that in the guidelines, but it's quite a short list. And again, my biggest comment I can tell you around eligibility of technology is if you're unsure, please reach out to us as soon as possible. And that's a conversation we're happy to have because it's much easier to address that question for a specific project and a specific technology.
Thanks, Chris. We've got another question. What if I am a small subsidiary of a large multinational? Am I eligible for this call?
It's another great question. So typically, no, we would not consider a subsidiary of a large corporation to be an eligible applicant, even if that subsidiary has fewer than 500 employees. However, that's something we're going to have to look at on a case-by-case basis with applicants. And so it's really important that you provide clear information on your corporate status and registration as part of that attachment to your EOI that we request.
Thanks, Chris. Can you go over the typical reporting requirements for an ERA-funded project? What can applicants expect to go through while they are a funded ERA applicant?
Of course. So during project execution, we have reporting requirements that are related to our administration of the funds that we are providing to you, the recipient. And so those reporting requirements are just between you and ERA and are kept private and confidential. And they include things like reporting on the expenses that were incurred during a milestone, the technical achievements and learnings of each milestone, and things of that nature. And so that's one piece of the reporting. The second piece of reporting is the public-facing reporting. And this primarily happens at the end of a project. Once you've completed your scope, we'll be looking for a final outcomes report that we will share publicly. And again, that's covering off at a high level the emissions and economic benefits of the project, as well as the technology advancement and lessons learned. And so that is a collaborative exercise in developing those final reports with ERA and the applicant to make sure that we are getting the right amount of information out to the public without compromising your IP or your commercialization, for example.
Thanks, Chris. We've had a number of questions about whether we are going to share the presentation or the slides. We will be posting the webinar after this, so please stay tuned. It will be on our website. We had another question here about projects that have begun construction but are not yet operational. Will those be eligible for the program?
Yes, another common scenario that we run into. And so I would say typically what ERA is looking to fund is activities that are additional or incremental to business as usual. So we are looking to fund new developments and new activities that are beyond something that's already happening. So if a project has already been announced or is at the very early stages of work, it could still be eligible for funding, provided there's a clear case for how ERA funding would accelerate or de-risk that project. However, if a project is already substantially close to completion, we're not going to provide funding in arrears, for example, for construction of that project. So again, it is a case-by-case basis. And if you're in that situation where maybe you've already commenced some work, again, your project could still be eligible. So we encourage you to reach out to our team to discuss your unique situation on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Chris. Another question here about eligibility. So we know that this call is open to SMEs. However, what if an innovation is led by a small business, which requires participation from a large company? Will this apply to the challenge?
Absolutely. And so this is a situation we see quite frequently with our funded projects where a technology developer or innovator is responsible for the technology itself, but they're working with a potential customer or a first adopter who may be a larger entity to pilot that technology, for example, at that industrial site. And so that is certainly a situation that is welcome and in fact encouraged for applications in this call, as long as the project is being led by the SME, and that's really the one that's going to be responsible for the technology. We're very happy to see a larger player as a partner, as a customer involved in the project.
Thanks, Chris. Now, we have a question here about regarding different milestones and the applicability of a different technology being captured through each of these milestones. So, for example, um, different milestones could qualify for more than one focused technology under the technology roadmap. Should applicants break up the project and submit more than one application?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so just to make sure I'm getting it right, I believe it pertains to a project where there might be multiple technologies involved that could apply to different focus areas in our roadmap. So assuming I'm interpreting your question correctly, we are open to projects that involve more than one technology and demonstrating multiple technologies in a single scope. So for example, you might have a project where there needs to be a heat recovery component, but also a thermal energy storage component. And you could consider those as two separate technologies, just as an example off the top of my head. That's perfectly fine, provided you can show us the relationship and the need for those two technologies to be demonstrated in parallel. Now, it goes without saying that we do not encourage you to apply for just a broad bucket of technologies that you're considering and try to deploy them all at once in one project. That typically leads to an unfocused proposal and a potentially challenging project in terms of the technical risk. And so if you're writing your proposal and you find you have too many technologies that you're talking about, again, we would probably encourage you to split that apart so that we can evaluate them separately and consider funding one or multiple of those projects in parallel. Again, in that type of situation, we do really encourage you to chat with our team about it because we can give you some specific pointers based on your situation about where to draw those boxes.
Thanks, Chris. We had another question here regarding the types of documents needed for applicants to prove their ownership. Now, if you take a look at the guidelines in there, there's an eligible applicant section that applicants must provide written confirmation of their corporate ownership, including any parent or subsidiary relationships and organizational confirmation. So identifying all permanent staff and structures. So all of these documents along with the EOI template will be found online on our website.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to that, Isabella. What we will do in this process is, of course, there will be an eligibility check at this expression of interest stage. As you go through the process, we also have a more detailed corporate search that we will do as part of our financial risk assessment. And so we will be checking at several points in the process to make sure that all applicants are eligible and working through any issues that come up with that.
Thanks, Chris. We had a question about drafts. So can drafts be submitted in our online application process and then replaced right up until the deadline?
Yeah, it's a great question. So generally our system does allow you to fill out information and then change it up to the deadline. However, once you hit submit on the portal, it does lock your proposal and you won't be able to change anything anymore. So you're certainly welcome to upload, for example, a draft EOI as a placeholder, fill out some information in the required forms as a placeholder, and you can save and validate that information as much as you want. But once you hit the final submission, it will lock you out. And so at that point, if you wanted to change it before the deadline, you would have to reach out to our team and we can unlock it for you. So I don't recommend you submit with draft material in there just because it'll create problems for you with the system. But certainly you're welcome to use the save function in that system as much as you want. And again, if you run into any issues with that, our team is available to help.
Thanks, Chris. Perhaps I'll direct the next question to Justin. Now, in terms of eligibility for projects outside of Alberta, what is the boundary around this? And can projects or pilot sites happen outside of the province?
Thanks, Isabella. So one of the great things about ERA, as Chris mentioned, is we can invest in global technologies outside of Alberta. We all know technologies don't have borders. And so we're here to support the reductions in emissions in Alberta. So we do want to see those technologies deployed in Alberta. So there is a requirement to have global technologies that we do fund piloted, demonstrated in Alberta to see a reduction in greenhouse gases in Alberta. So there's not a portioned allocation for funding for technologies outside of Alberta companies. We're open to the best in class, best quality projects that are submitted, whether they be Alberta or global, but they have to have a demonstration pilot in the province.
Thanks for that, Justin. Now, we have another question about digital and software-based solutions. Now, if these already exist in some form, how would ERA define a particular project for these?
Yes, that's a very good question when it comes to digital and software technologies, because we know these are a little bit different than the hard tech pilots that we're used to working with. And so I'll just comment that certainly what we're looking for when folks are proposing a digital or software-based solution to us is that there is some existing product, some minimal viable product there. We're not looking to have you come to us with a concept for a software or an app or something like that, and then have it developed as part of the project. We are looking for something to already be built and be ready for piloting. And so typically what we'd be expecting with a digital or software project would be you, the applicant, with a software solution ready to go, or at least at a minimum viable stage of development, and then deploying that in the field to validate the performance of that software solution in the intended use case. And so again, happy to chat that through if you want to reach out to our team. But it's a really important piece, because we do look for that tangible testing and validation of the performance of the solution to be the core focus of the project.
Thanks, Chris. Now, how does ERA define novel and innovative?
Yes, another frequently asked question. So we do have a section in the guidelines about this, where we provide a couple of examples of how you can justify how your solution is novel or new to Alberta. So the most common way you can do this is by showing us that your technology is not something that would be considered fully commercial or business as usual in the province. So if someone's already doing this, if companies are already adopting it in their operations, it might not pass our test for novel. But if it's something that's been proven elsewhere in Canada or in the world, and your project is to bring it to Alberta and prove that it works here for our industry, then it absolutely could be novel, even if the technology's already been developed. And there's a wide spectrum of opportunities to justify that novelty, depending where you fall on that TRL spectrum. So we do expect to see some submissions for totally new technologies at a lower technology readiness level that maybe haven't been tried anywhere in the world, and we're certainly happy to see those. But we're also happy to fund things that are a lot closer to commercialization and may just need that proof point in Alberta in a specific industry to get over the finish line. And so again, a good place to consult our team if you have further questions.
Thanks, Chris. Now we had a question about TRL, or technology readiness level requirements. And typically ERA likes to see projects that end at a technology readiness level of 7, 8, or 9. And so you can come in before that timeline, but have your project ending after that point in time. And Chris, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I think that's a great definition. And generally, we're less worried about exactly what TRL number you fall at and more about what you're hoping to advance and get to during the project. And we'll also be checking the realistic, whether or not that's realistic as part of your project plan. So again, the more detail you can give us to justify your current technology readiness level and where you hope to get to in the project, the better we'll be able to make sure that you fit within what we're looking for.
Thanks, Chris. We had some questions of clarification around the EOI. In the guidelines, we have 8 pages. So it will be an 8-page EOI for the guidelines, just to clarify that.
I may have said 10 previously, but Isabella, you are right. It does say 8 in the guidelines. So we'll make sure that's consistent everywhere. So again, 8 pages on the EOI, sorry.
Now, in terms of ownership, ERA does not retain any ownership in the project, and I'm not too sure, Chris, if you have any other thoughts you want to add to that.
Yeah, so obviously ownership of IP is absolutely critical to SMEs and to all folks working in the innovation space. And so ERA is not looking to take an ownership of your IP, whether that's background IP or IP developed during the project. However, what we do want to do is make sure that the advancement of the IP during the project is made available for the benefit of Alberta. So if you develop a technology and then shelve it using ERA dollars, that might be something that we would have to look at. But generally what we're looking for is to be a partner and a support for you in advancing your IP. And so we don't typically wade into ownership or rights of that IP.
Great. I don't believe we have any more time for questions. And so I will pass it back to Chris to wrap up.
Thanks very much, Isabella, and thank you to everyone for your wonderful questions on the webinar today. Again, our teams are always available to help applicants move through our process. So as always, open door policy, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thanks once again, everyone, and please have a wonderful day.